just did. There we go.
All right.
Progress. Okay, we got 2 out there, and you tell me when we're ready to admit them.
So I'm ready whenever you are, Rob.
Yeah, I'm ready. Okay. Hey, there's Chuck. All of our friends are here. Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Hello. You guys, it's so wet and cold at our house right now. I don't know what to do outside. You know, you can barely stand to be outside. I don't get it.
Yeah, so wet and cold. I think there's a time delay on this video.
Wow.
Okay, let's see here. Who else? Okay, we have a couple of more. All right, we'll get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Danielson. I'm on the board of the Vernon County Energy District, and I welcome you to our meeting tonight of the Energy Club. This is about a year now, a little bit more than a year after we got started as a 501(c) nonprofit organization to basically promote really good things happening in the area of energy that benefit ourselves and the planet, reduce carbon emissions and save on electric bills, and generally have a good time doing the right thing. And it's my honor tonight to be able to introduce to you, oh yeah, I should look down here. I should be able to introduce to you Alan Buck, president of the organization. And I can tell you that Alan is an avid energy innovator. In addition to an advocate for good practices, he develops them on his own. And whenever Alan has advice to give, I always listen very carefully. So it's my pleasure to let him take over and help us learn how to have a good time this summer if we happen to be fortunate enough to have an electric vehicle.
Well, thanks, Rob. That was a real nice introduction. Why don't I just get right into the presentation here? I just want to let everybody, I mean, my idea of when I was putting this thing together is, the idea is that people who don't have an EV and are thinking about it, there are some things you learn about driving an EV once you have one. And I'd like to just help people understand more about what it is actually like to own an EV and travel around using one. I'm going to share my screen, and we should be all right. Can you guys see the video or see my screen? Are we all good?
Yes, it looks good, Alan.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, yeah, we are on our second electric vehicle. In 2016, Laura and I leased a Nissan Leaf, and we drove that for 3 years and 45,000 miles. And then after our lease was up on that, then we bought our current car, which is a Tesla Model 3. And we're up to almost, actually, we are just over 40,000 miles on that vehicle now. So, between the two, we've driven 85,000 miles plus on electricity. One of the first things one of the first terms that comes to mind when people think of electric vehicles is range anxiety. And I guess there's a few different ways you can define range anxiety. This is one way I think of it. When you see this sign and you feel like the other sign, that's range anxiety. But let's talk about range, because that, since we've had, every EV we've had, anytime anybody asks me about it, the very first question they ask is, what's the range? And I'm realizing, before we had an EV, that was the first thing I thought of as well. And the funny thing is, if we've got gas vehicles, I suspect most people with a gas-powered vehicle, if you ask them what the range is, they don't know. And And for probably good reason, because they don't need to know. It doesn't matter on a gas vehicle. But when you buy an EV, as you can see from this, the range can be all over the place. A brand new Nissan Leaf, the low end is 149 miles. The high end on those is 226. You get up to your Model 3, and that's 353 miles is the range on a brand new Model 3 with the long range battery. You can get a Model S and go that's over 400 miles. It's kind of all over the place. But to me, the important thing to notice here is as ranges go up and the infrastructure improves, it becomes less and less of an issue. Pretty soon, nobody's going to care what the range is because it won't matter. And to me, this kind of defines why. I brought up Google Maps and looked at how many gas stations there are just on Highway 14 going from Viroqua to Madison. So this doesn't count gas stations in Viroqua or in Madison. These are just in between. And there's 18 gas stations along in that drive. On that same trip, there are now 5 EV chargers. Up until a year ago, there was 1. The 4 of those went in the last year. So that to me tells me that, the infrastructure is getting a lot better. You're not going to need to worry about it. And one of the things I think people forget about when they think about an EV, if you haven't had an EV, where am I going to charge it? That's the thing a lot of people ask. Where will I be able to charge my EV? And most times they don't realize you're going to charge it at home. It's going to be in your garage when it's getting charged. Really the question, range is only one question. The other question that you need to look at if you're thinking about taking EVs on any kind of trips is what types of chargers are available and where are they located. So first of all, we'll talk about what types of chargers there are, because there's a lot of terminology that until you've been around these a little bit may seem real confusing. Level 1, level 2, DC fast charger, things like that. So first, I just want to clear up what those all are and what they mean. The slowest charger is typically called a trickle charger. Okay, and in the level thing, that would be a level 1 charger. It's your wall outlet. You can plug into that. Usually when you're plugged in, you'll get about 6 miles for every hour that you're plugged in. Sometimes, more or less 4 to 6 miles for every hour that your car is plugged in on one of these. And most people drive less than 40 miles per day. They average less than 40 miles per day of driving. So if you think about this, you get home from work, you plug into one of these. Most people don't need any more than this in their home. You can get home from work, plug in your car, and it'll be fully charged the next morning when you leave for work, even with a trickle charger. The next, in power and how fast they charge is called the level 2. And these seem to be pretty universal as far as what they call them. They're all level 2 chargers. This is the one in front of Kickapoo Creek side. These are the most common ones that are all over and at the co-op, at restaurants. These are the most common ones you're going to find out there on the road. These are typically, if you put a charger in your garage at home, if you do install a separate charger, it's going to be one of these that you install or something typical. And with these, you'll get anywhere from 25 to 40 miles of range for every hour that you're plugged in. The next is a DC fast charger. In the Tesla world, it's called a Supercharger. And this is what's called a level 3 charger. And on these, you can get, typically 160 plus miles of range for every hour that you're plugged in. These are starting to get more common, but they're not as prevalent as they could be. These are the ones that we really need a lot more of. Um, and I just kind of wanted to point this out. A couple of weeks ago, Laura and I went down to Chicago, and I plugged in at a 250 kilowatt charger down there, and this was what the picture we took of our car. So we were getting 731 miles of range for 1 hour of being plugged in on that supercharger. That's the fastest I've seen yet. So it's getting better all the time. So that brings me to the next part of this equation, is the different connectors, because that confuses people as well if you don't know what these all are. You'll notice at the level, the DC fast charger at the Kickapoo Creek side there's two different handles. This is what one of them looks like. This is called a CHAdeMO connector. And from what I can tell, this is what our Nissan Leaf used. And from what I can tell, Nissan is the only one that uses this CHAdeMO charger. So CHAdeMO is unique to the Nissan world. Here's your Tesla connector, which is unique to the Tesla world. And then you've got the CCS SAE combo connector, which this is what everybody else uses. So now the CHAdeMO and the Tesla and this are all fast charger connections. So this is a J1772, which is what the level 2 charger has down there. These are the universal connectors. These are the ones that every car can run off of. If you have a Tesla, it came with an adapter that you just plug this thing into that adapter, and then you can plug it into your car. But every other EV out there, you'll just be able to plug this straight into. And I just to point out the difference, why the DC fast chargers are called a DC fast charger and the others are level 1 and level 2. The word charger is a little bit of it's not the correct terminology if you want to be real real specific, because level 1 and level 2, these are technically they're called EV service equipment. You may have seen the abbreviation EVSE. And what these are actually providing AC current to the car. The charger is actually built into the car, and it's converting the AC to the DC that is then used to charge the batteries. Okay, so level 1 and 2 are actually just connecting the car to the grid and doing a little bit of controlling as far as how many amps can flow. The DC fast chargers, on those, you're actually plugging in to a charger. It is the charger for the car. It's communicating with the car as far as battery status and how many amps to feed at a time. So just a little bit of, you don't need to know that, but it's just a little something to understand what the difference is. So once you know about these chargers, and if you've got an EV and you know which charger, which connector you have, the next question is, how do you find these things when you're out there on the road? And best answer I got is there's an app for that. It's called PlugShare. This app is a great app to have. What I've got here, the picture on the left is from their website, and then the picture on the right is a screenshot of the app on my phone. This, as far as I can tell, is the most comprehensive database of EV chargers there is. Pretty much every single charger out there is listed in here, and it makes it pretty easy to find them. If you've got a Tesla, the chargers are built into the navigation. You can say navigate to the nearest supercharger and it'll just tell you where the nearest one is. Or like in this case, I punched in a destination of Indianapolis and it's showing me, okay, drive to Rockford, plug in for 15 minutes, then drive to Merrillville, Indiana, plug in for 25 minutes, and you'll get to Indianapolis with 16% left. So that's, the Tesla kind of makes it pretty much of a no-brainer. If you're driving another car and using PlugShare, you got to use your map and kind of plan out where you're going to stop and charge. And, it takes a little more thought. But PlugShare makes it pretty easy to do. It's not painful. So there are some areas where there just aren't chargers. And what do you do if there isn't a charger? The answer is bring your own. Our Tesla came with this charger in the back in the trunk. When we had our Nissan, it had a very similar charger that came with the car. This, as you can see, the Tesla one has two different plugs. One is a trickle charger plug, and the other is it's called a NEMA 1450. I took a picture. This is the outlet that I installed in our barn to plug our chargers into. It's the same outlet that an electric range would use. So if you install an electric stove in your house, this is the kind of outlet you're going to have. And so this is what you'd put in your garage and then plug your charger into. They're pretty standard. The NEMA 1450 also happens to be the same standard that campers that have 50 amp service use. So most campgrounds have at least a few of these. A lot of campgrounds will only have 30 amp service, and you would need a different connector, but a different plug. But these NEMA 1450s are pretty common. And if you're not sure how to find one, PlugShare can help you with that as well. You can choose which plugs you want. Like in here, I'm saying, show me all the NEMA 1450s and show me all the wall chargers. And this is showing me where I can find them in Wisconsin. This is definitely not as robust a list. There's a ton of campgrounds that aren't listed here. These are listed because somebody who was on PlugShare was at that campground and went into the PlugShare amp and told PlugShare about it. So that's how these get listed. It's kind of the community wiki type of thing where everybody's adding to that database. But with cars that you don't have the range, or you're in a place where there just aren't chargers, these will do, and they work pretty well. Another term that I think a lot of people don't know until you have an EV is, what does it mean to get iced? When in the EV world, when we talk about ICE vehicles, it's an internal combustion engine. And like in this case, this guy thought he was being funny and sticking the Tesla cable onto the back of his truck. But it can be very frustrating when you get to a charger and there's a not EV car that's not charging, that is just taking up the space and in your way to, when you really need a charge, it's very frustrating. I noticed down at the Kickapoo Creek side here, they did put up a couple of signs, and it seems to have helped, because before that, it seemed pretty much every time I went by there were gas powered vehicles blocking the EV chargers. Since they put the signs up, it does seem to be better. And actually, that's one suggestion I would like to make to anybody who, any business owner or whatever who is looking to put in an EV charger. Don't put them in the best parking spots. Put them further out. A lot of times, a lot of places, they have them in prime parking spaces. And I think that's why they get iced often. I'd be happy to walk a little bit to know it's not going to be blocked. So just another thing to know, another term that you don't know until you actually have an EV. The other thing people ask, what affects range? And you don't realize how much your range can be affected until you get in the conditions where it is. Cold will make a big difference in your range. And the colder, the bigger the difference. These are just kind of my estimates based on what we've experienced over all our winters of driving an EV. You know, if you get 25 to 30 degrees, you know, maybe about a 10% drop in your range. You get below about 15, it's definitely significantly higher. You get to 0, and now it's a real hit in your range. One of the things that you can do is, you know, keep the heat in your car lower, and using the seat heaters and the steering wheel heater makes that a much more tolerable. Yeah, when we had that Nissan Leaf, I got stories, you don't even want to hear them, but it was not pretty. trying to drive through the cold and get there without running out of charge. There again, as the batteries get larger and the range is less of it, you know, it becomes less of an issue. As the batteries are larger and the infrastructure gets better, that range anxiety really ceases to exist. But I have experienced it, and cold is a common problem with that. How fast you drive makes a big difference in your range. And the faster you drive, the more energy it takes to go the same distance. You know, your drag, your aerodynamic drag goes down, gets worse the faster you go, which makes sense why wind would affect it as well. You know, if you're driving into a 30-mile-an-hour wind, it's basically the same amount of effort as driving 30 miles an hour faster. So the car has to work that much harder. And when I talk about drag here, I'm talking about just the general aerodynamics of the car, how well, you know, just how slippery that car is. And that's one of the things that, you know, I think it's worth looking at when you're considering buying an EV, is to look at the shape of that car. Is how easy is this going to slide through the air? Like when we had our Nissan Leaf, the difference between driving 45 miles an hour and driving 65 miles an hour was probably close to a 50% drop in our range. That car was not very aerodynamic. In our Model 3, that car is designed to be, you know, it's probably one of the lowest drag coefficients of any cars made. And I really don't notice much, if any, drop. It's not a significant drop by going freeway speeds. Whereas, like I say, with our Nissan Leaf, I think I had that car on the freeway twice in the 3 years we had it exactly because of that. Putting a bike rack on the back of your car makes a big difference. I even noticed this when the previous car we had that was a gas powered car. It was a Honda Insight, so it was a hybrid, got 50 miles to the gallon. When I put my bike rack on, it dropped down to about 35. So it makes a bigger difference than you realize. And there again, pulling a trailer, same thing. You've now added a lot of drag to your car. One of the other things I'd like to mention about the cold, because, you know, sometimes, you know, I don't know that people necessarily realize or make the connection, but, you know, when you're driving a gas-powered car, that engine gets hot and it needs a radiator to keep it from overheating. Well, that heat is energy that is being wasted. That's energy that's in the gas that is not contributing to moving the car forward. That is energy that is just pure waste. So in the winter, all they got to do is just direct that heat into the vehicle. So it's still excess energy that's being wasted, that's just working to keep your car warm. You know, now you're using it to keep the inside of the car warm. an EV doesn't waste energy by generating a lot of heat. And so when it's cold, now you need to actually run a heater to warm up the car. And that is a big part of where the range loss comes from, is just the extra energy that the car has to use to create the heat that you're looking for inside the vehicle. When you have to stop at a level 2 charger and you need 100 miles of range and you realize I'm going to be sitting here for 2.5 hours, for a lot of people, that sounds like a really excruciating concept that, oh man, I am stuck here for 2 hours while my car charges. I've actually found it to me, it's not such a bad deal. This picture was Laura and I were on our way back from Central Illinois a few years ago in our Nissan Leaf, and we stopped in Rockford to plug in at the hospital there, and we needed a couple, 2.5 hours worth of charging. And so I started looking around on Google Maps, and I found this little botanical garden down by the river there. It's fabulous, a gorgeous place. It was, it was something we discovered by stopping and getting off the beaten path and having some time to look around. I've got a lot of stories like that from driving our EV over the years. I mean, downtown Sparta is actually not a bad place to walk around for a couple hours. They got the little park down by the creek under there, or maybe that's a river, I'm not sure, but stopping at a little restaurants. There used to be a great little Mexican grocery store with a restaurant built in Sun Prairie that we liked to eat at when we would stop there to charge. So, getting off the beaten path and having a couple hours to poke around in some place you wouldn't look at otherwise, it's not all that bad. So to me, it's kind of like, finding the sunshine, and it's there. It's not so bad. I kind of miss some of those stops now with our new car because, with the Model 3, we don't need to do that anymore. So when we were going through the idea, our thought process to get the Leaf in the first place, these were some of the things we thought about as we were making the decision to buy that car or to lease that car. And this, I call this the 90% rule. It's probably not the right term, but this is what I call it. The idea is to get what you need for most of your trips, your day in and day out stuff. We realized when we got that Leaf that it had a 100-mile range. This isn't a car we're going to drive to Indianapolis. This isn't a car we're going to drive to Seattle. But this is a car that will work for our general, it meets our daily needs just fine. And so what we did was we got that car, and then with the idea that when we needed to do these longer trips, we could rent a car. And we did. I'd go to call up Sleepy Hollow and rent a vehicle to use for a couple of days when we had to take a longer trip. And I did start thinking about, okay, well, gee, by the time I pay for renting the car, is it worth it? If I save it on getting the car I need most of the time, if I'm spending less on that, but I'm paying more for a rental, how does it all add up? And so I just kind of brought up a few numbers here just to kind of compare costs. The Chevy Traverse and the Chevy Spark I brought up just so you could kind of compare 2 miles per gallon cost gas-powered vehicles. The Chevy Spark's just a little car that, it's a 4-door. You can carry a few people in it, going to work, going to the grocery store. For a lot of people, that would work. A well-equipped Spark is, just under $17,000. The Chevy Traverse is an SUV. It's bigger, beefier vehicle, doesn't have near the efficiency. And look at the difference to run these things. You're spending, 3 times as much to buy the vehicle in the first place, and also doubling your annual fuel cost. Tell you what, you can rent a car. You know, you could rent an SUV if you want the SUV for your vacation. You know, and a lot of times that's how the dealers will upsell you. They'll push you into a bigger car. Okay, well, yeah, I need this to get me around day in and day out. Yeah, but what about when you go on vacation? Well, you know, once a year I need a car for 2 weeks that's bigger. Rent it for 2 weeks and you'll be way ahead. And here again, just to compare, you know, a Model Y and a Chevy Traverse are going to be very similar size-wise. Look at the cost difference, $700 difference to buy the car, and you know, $2,200 savings in annual fuel costs. No oil changes required. You know, overall, you're going to be, you know, over a 5-year period of time, that Tesla Model Y will, you know, run circles around a Chevy Traverse, and you're going to have much better technology all the way around. The navigation and the autopilot, it's, you know, what they've got is superior to what anybody else has. So, so I just kind of wanted to point that out as a comparison, because a lot of people, you know, when they think of a Tesla, they just think expensive. And $50,000 is a lot to spend on a car, but when you look at what a typical SUV is going for, they're not off base. They're very competitive. So to wrap up, I just kind of want to connect the dots, because this, there again, when we were thinking about getting an EV in the first place, this was sort of the thought process we went through. You know, for us, getting off fossil fuel, reducing our carbon footprint is a very important thing. So, you know, our thing is we want to get off fossil fuels. And I realized, you know, the best way to do that is stop buying fossil fuels. If I don't want to use gas, I got to stop buying gas. And the best way for me to stop buying gas is to stop buying things that use gas. So, and part of the downside is there, you know, or at least was 5 years ago, when it came to buying an EV, you didn't have much for choice. You know, 5 years ago, I was like, you know, I got a Nissan Leaf for a Tesla Model S. The Model 3 didn't even exist yet. And, you know, there was no way we could afford a Model S, so we went with the Nissan Leaf. But the thought process was, you know what, every time one of us buys an electric vehicle, we're telling the manufacturers, keep making them, because there's a market. You know, if we keep buying gas-powered vehicles, they'll keep making gas-powered vehicles. If we buy electric vehicles, they will make more of them. The choices will get better. You know, so we made a conscious decision that we'll buy this car to encourage more EVs to come on the market. And as more people own EVs and there's more of them on the road, the EV infrastructure is only going to get better. You know, so while, you know, and we, there, like I said, you know, we realized that for some trips our Nissan Leaf wouldn't work and we would need to rent. But by us owning an EV and now more people owning EVs, you're seeing more and more chargers. The infrastructure is, from where it is today from where it was 5 years ago, it's already, you know, significantly improved, and it's just barely begun. I think it's only a matter of time till, you know, between here and Madison, you'll see 18 fast chargers and maybe 5 gas stations, you know, once everybody's, you know, switched over. You know, and that is how it's up to us. You know, we have the power to get us off fossil fuels. I don't, you know, I'm not expecting the gas and oil companies to help do that. You know, the government can sure do things to make it easier for us, but you know what? We can vote with our checkbooks and vote with our wallets, and we can make this difference. So that's what I've got. If anybody's got any questions or comments, let me come back here. There we go. I did get one question by email. Somebody had asked about EV batteries and recycling them. And that is a good question. And there is for a couple of years ago, I had somebody tell me, well, don't get an EVs because those batteries can't be recycled. And that's really not true. 5 years ago, you couldn't recycle those batteries, not because the batteries can't be recycled, but there was nobody in the business of recycling them, because there weren't enough of them around to set up a business to do that. Now there are enough on the road, and there are companies that are in business to recycle. And there's a company called Redwood Materials in Nevada that they've been in business a couple of years, and they do recycle all these lithium batteries, whether it's from your cell phone or the lithium battery in your car. So that recycling stream is developing because now there are enough EVs that is a viable business. So the last thing I read about this Redwood Materials in particular was they expected that recycling a battery, they would recover 100% of the cobalt, 100% of the nickel, about 85% of the lithium. So they were, it's a pretty efficient circle. They can recycle and put a significant amount of those materials back into the supply chain.
Al, this is Chuck Pasker.
Hi, Chuck.
Hi. I got 2 or 3 comments from people who would never buy an EV car because the battery's warranty for 100,000 miles, if that, and they said then they got to buy a new battery. It's going to cost the same amount as buying a new car. Is that true or what?
Well, it's not as much as a new car. For example, the last price I'd heard, if somebody wore out the battery on their Tesla, you would be spending about $10,000. The battery on the Tesla is warranted for 8 years or 120,000 miles, but it should last much longer than that. The other car makers are working on their battery reliability, and they're getting better. When we had our Leaf for 45,000 miles, never had a problem with it. That also has an 8-year warranty on the battery. But I do know a friend of mine also bought a Leaf, and they did have some warranty work done that their battery was giving them some problems. But I've also read articles about people who've had older Leafs and $5,000 they could get a new battery, get their battery replaced. The other kind of flip side of that is if you look at, a new engine or a new transmission, you're spending $5,000 as well. So it's not, it's not the same, but, a lot of people put $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 into a new tranny in their minivan and stuff like that. So, and when you take, and if you also offset that against the other maintenance costs you don't have, you're not changing the oil. There's, your brakes will literally last forever. There's no exhaust. Your antifreeze and radiator, all these things that are ongoing scheduled maintenance that after a while they rust out and need to be replaced. You just don't have them.
What do you think would be the resale value of a 10-year-old EV car?
It depends on the car. Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say it does very much depend on the car. There again, Tesla is just so far ahead in this. Teslas hold their resale value very well. Even after 5 years, you still have a very significant value left in that car. My old Nissan that I had is probably not worth very much money. And that has more to do with how much things have changed.
Yeah.
Why would somebody pay a significant amount of money for a 3-year-old Leaf that has a 100-mile range when they can go out and buy a brand new one that has, a 200-mile range.
Plus, I want to comment here. I think the other factor is that batteries and technologies are getting more and more efficient and less expensive every year. And so by the year 2028, it's possible that that $10,000 battery replacement is $5,000 or maybe even less. I mean, I just think that's and then on the flip side, how much is a gallon of gas going to cost at that point, with diminishing returns and seeing how we're all understanding how those costs are falling on all of us from the carbon emissions. So
yeah, and that's a very good point.
This is Rob. I have a question. So as you're planning your road trip, you're looking at the charging stations, and in the summer or whenever during a heavy travel season, you look at all the other cars on the road, and you must have, a little bit of anxiety about like when you've got a charging station that you need to stop and charge at, if there's going to be a backup there, or is that anxiety exist? And if so, are there workarounds to that kind of problem right now? Or is it a problem for all I know?
Yeah. Well, in the 3 years that we had our Leaf, there was only one time that we had to wait for a charger. And that was a charger just outside of Madison. We were on our way in, and there was somebody had the BMW, I forgot which version, the i3, I think it was. And there was somebody at that charger when we got there. And so we had to wait about 10 minutes, 15 minutes till they were done. That's the only time in our 5 years I've had to wait. Now, as they become more and more common, that may, become more of an issue. But at the same time, as there's more cars on the road, they're getting to be the amount of fast chargers there are now compared to what we had 5 years ago, it's night and day difference.
So ahead, you can't reserve a charger, I guess, right?
Yeah, I don't know of any way to do that. And yep. And and what most of the what they do with these chargers is they charge by the minute. So when you're plugged into this fast charger, you're paying by the minute. So if your car is fully charged and you're still in the store goofing around, guess what? You're still paying.
well, they'll actually charge you extra.
Tesla does.
Tesla does. And the other ones, I mean, if they might turn off on their own, but to Rob's question, here we don't have, we can't reserve them yet, but on the coasts where there are many, many more Teslas, you do, like you put in your destination and it basically slots a place for you. You get there at that time, you're there for 20 minutes and you leave. Yeah.
And the other thing about that too, that, like when you're on your Tesla, when I put in a charger, it shows me how many chargers there are there and how many of them are in use. So, or how many of them are available. So like if I'm up going to the fast charger and the Supercharger in La Crosse, it'll say 6 out of 8 are available. So, I can, before I've even gone there, I can have a pretty good idea if there'll be any available. So, and they've done a pretty good job of expanding them. Like if you get out on Madison, there's 2 stations with Superchargers. There's one with 3 of them. And like half a mile up the road, there's another 8. And I'm sure the 3 were there first. I don't know, and they started getting filled up. And so then the other 8 got built to allow for that, and they do keep up with that. Part of the difference, like in Madison there, you'll get a lot of people who, they rent, so they live in an apartment and they want to own an EV, but they have no way to charge at home. And so, for those types of situations, then you do need a charger nearby. If you don't own or have a a plug available to you, then you need to be able to go somewhere nearby to charge.
If I have an Audi E-Tron, can I charge in a Tesla fast charging station?
No, no, they don't. They don't have that cross compatibility.
Well, if I had the right adapter.
You'd still need I don't know how it would work. That's a good question. I've heard of people attempting it, but I don't, like the Tesla charger,
You can't
I just
get an
pull it and
adapter
plug it in because it
backwards.
just knows it's my car.
You can only get an adapter that goes from a Tesla and adapts to other charging stations, but you can't get an adapter that goes the other way.
Yeah.
Probably because of the DC to DC factor there, Chuck.
There's that, plus it's just, I mean, the special thing about Tesla is that they realized that when they were going to create an electric car, they realized they needed to create a charging infrastructure to go with it. And so it's very proprietary. It's amazing compared to any other charging infrastructure yet, because when you put the private market, if you've got all these car manufacturers, but nobody wants to take responsibility for the charging network, you have a lot of trial and error failures in that charging network. And there's no kind of like overarching planning body.
But you with the Tesla, you can plug into Electrify America station?
With the right adapter.
You have to have an adapter. It's about $400 for the DC adapter, and I think it's less, maybe 150 for the other one comes with your car, but you can get an extra one just for a regular level 2 adapter.
Yeah. For example, we did buy an extra level 2 adapter because, it's a level 2 charger in our barn. I didn't get the Tesla charger. And so one of them just stays on our charger that's in the barn that we charge at home. And then the other one stays in our glove box so that if we're out and we need it to charge, I'm guaranteed I've got that adapter with. So, yep. Yeah. And kind of back to Alicia's point about that's part of the difference between, using, the CHAdeMO and the SAE combo, adapters, the companies that are putting in these other DC fast chargers, they're, it's expensive to put them in. So they're putting them in where they're going to get the most traffic right now. Like for example, there's a bunch of them around the Madison area, but if you want to go across country, it's real spotty. I think they're really looking at where do people live, where are the rental properties, and where are people going to be using these things. And so they're not as much setting them up to go cross country. That is beginning to change though. Charge America, I know, has one route completed kind of across the center of the US where I think about every 100 miles or so, they've got a DC fast charger. And when I was, preparing for this, I actually on PlugShare, I noticed Charge America, like on I-90 going out to the West Coast, they're all under construction yet, so they're not operational, but they're putting them in there as well, about every 100 miles. So, it's getting better. 2 years ago when we drove to Seattle, it would have been almost impossible to do in any other EV. In our Tesla, it was a piece of cake. But next year, when all these, Charge America chargers are online, then you could probably do it in any of the other EVs that are out there.
So you said that if like an RV campsite would probably have a capability you could plug in any EV car?
Yeah, most of them do. You need to bring your charger with because they're just giving you the outlet. But yep.
So that would be a good backup.
It sure is. Yeah, it sure is.
And a lot of, I don't know, this is going to change so much over the next 2 years. It seems like the car companies have made this commitment to switch to electric vehicles. And now Joe Biden is getting more serious about an actual infrastructure. But, you know, in a pinch, I can't tell you how many weird places I've plugged into the wall and sat there for hours. I mean, but I don't think anyone else is going to have to do that. I think that's like the beginning of the, of like forming the industry, and it's just going to get easier and easier and easier. And now it's so much easier than it was even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, I think 20 years from now, it's going to be every gas station will have at least one.
I
But we're
don't know
not
if there
there
will
yet.
be that many gas stations, like Al said. I mean,
That's true.
Chevy says all electric by 2030, and VW is following. I mean, I think the only people, I mean, Toyota, but they're already doing it. I don't know, but Ford is doing it. People are just realizing that, like, on every level, it's less expensive ultimately, because the I mean, you think about it. If you have a combustion engine, it's under stress constantly. It's like constantly braking. Whereas if you have an electric vehicle, you just have these direct drive motors, the electronics, and the battery. And I think they're realizing that they can actually produce them cheaper and then increase their margin.
But there's a lot of combustible engines cars out there, and
Yes, there are.
and they're not going to go away in the next 50 years.
Right. There's
They'll
going
still
to
be around.
I don't
Yeah.
know. You want to make a bet?
Even have antiques, if nothing else.
I'll bet ya.
Right.
I don't think so. They'll
You
still be
bet.
around 50 years from now.
Yeah, you've got 50-year-old cars around now, and you're right. They're not going to go away. But, you know, I do see at some point where it's going to be as difficult buying gas for your 50-year-old car as it was finding an electric charger a couple
Right.
years ago for my EV.
I mean, my
It's
first
gonna-
car
it's gonna
drove on leaded gasoline.
Yeah.
Like, you can't get it. There's no place to get it. You have to put lead in your gas, right? And that wasn't that long ago. I'm
Right.
50.
Right.
Pretty soon it'll be as good as your bike.
Yeah. 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 It's kind of interesting to me watching this transition, how, we're on the, we are really getting to watch, a major interruption in what is a significant, very important, critical part of our lifestyle is, that of vehicles and transportation. And we are literally watching that whole system kind of get turned on its head. And it's happening right now.
Al, when you were talking about things affecting range, I'm glad I'm here because I'm a real slow learner, and so I don't pick stuff up very fast. So it's a good learning experience for everybody else. I forgot about heat. We took a week's trip over Memorial Day, parked at the La Crosse Airport, surface parking, and it was fairly warm. And God love Tesla. I think one of their advantages is how well they condition that battery to keep it at about a normal, somewhere in the normal temperature range. And I was amazed at how much energy that took. I mean, just it never occurred to me about that. But like I say, lesson learned. I won't go there with kind of mediocre change next time if I'm going to leave it that long.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. And at least at the airport there, they do have a level 2 charger. So you need to top it off a little bit to get to the supercharger. You can. And yeah. Yeah. You figure out all kinds of ways, like using the campsites, or, hey, I can plug in here for 10 minutes and then that'll get me to a fast charger. And, I actually, with the Leaf, there was one time I ran that car. It's so dead. I couldn't get up a hill. I was trying to get to my stepmom's house and I couldn't get up the hill, and I'd roll back down and I'd try again and it wouldn't. And I ended up, there was a horse barn right there and they had solar panels on the roof. And I thought, these people are going to be like-minded. And I went and knocked on the door, and this is a weird request, but can I plug in my car for a few minutes? And the lady was super nice about it. Oh yeah, no problem. And offered me coffee and everything. Here, you want to read the paper while you're waiting? And
That's
so,
the story.
yeah. I shouldn't have to do that again, but it wasn't the end of the world, you know. But that's it. You know, that's what with those of us who are, you know, more the pioneers, the people who are really out front. Those are some of the things, you know, we had to work with. You know, it's getting so much better. Very few people.
Alicia, you probably would know this answer. I have solar panels, and is there a way to make sure you only use solar electricity charging your vehicle? Isn't there a computer to do that or not?
Well, I mean, if you if you have a consumption meter or some kind of way to tell how much you're using at your inside of your house, and you're making more power than you're using, I mean, there would be you could do it. You could do it. There's a way to do it, but I'm not sure that it would be valuable in any way.
Let me pipe in and let Al explain.
Yeah, I can answer that question for you.
Oh,
Chuck.
that's right. I forgot.
Okay.
Al has the fancy. I'm sorry. Al has the fancy. He can maybe even set this up for you, Chuck.
Yeah, I don't know of a commercially available system that will do that yet, but I built my own. And you know, so because you need a couple of things to make that work. You know, you need, number one, an EV charger that you can turn on and off using, you know, some control. And you also need an EV charger that you can adjust the amperage on, you know, using some control. Okay. I found an open source charger called Open EV or Open. I'd have to look it up. Oh, EVSE. It's Open EVSE is the name of this charger. It's an open source charger. You can buy them online. But that one lets me do both. So I can turn it on and off, and then I can. So that's one piece, is you need a charger that has both of those. Okay. Then you need an energy monitor that you can read, like Alicia said, are you producing more than you're using? You know, if your fridge or your well or, you know, the blow dryer's on or whatever, you know, because you want to, you know, so this energy monitor needs to let you know real time what's happening at the grid. Am I sending electricity to the grid or am I pulling from the grid? And then the third thing is just some sort of controller that takes those two and has the brains to make it work. And that's what I built. So I built this little, it's just a tiny little computer that monitors, you know, looks at what the energy monitor says, and then turns the charger on and off and adjusts the amperage to track it.
And Al, is that the same monitor that we just installed at the library?
It is.
Oh.
Yep. That energy monitor is about you can, if you don't have a lot of service, you can get by for, it's $110. A typical EV level 2 charger is gonna be in the $400 to $500 range, and that's what this Open EVSE runs. It was $430, $450, something like that. And then my little brain box that controls it was about another $100, and in a few hours of me scratching my head figuring out how to get it set up to work. But once I've got it, it's great. With part of my motivation to do that was, Scenic Rivers is changing the way they pay for excess generation. So my goal is to have my meter as close to zero as possible at all times. And this was my first step towards getting that. So the cool thing is, once you get, once you start on these kind of controls, I replaced put in an overriding controller on our freezer so that I can change the temperature during the day and change it at night. So, my freezer gets real cold during the day when the sun is shining, and then it turns the temperature up at night. So, this time of year, it still runs at night a few times. It cycles a few times during the night, but in the winter, it'll run during the day when the sun's shining and not run at all at night. Our clothes washer, I load it up when the sun's shining, I'm making enough juice, boom, it starts running. So you can bring other things in to manage that load to track your solar production. So I'm glad you asked that question, Chuck, because that's something very near and dear to me.
Us unsophisticated people, Al, we get up and look at the sunshine and say, let's plug the car in.
Yeah. Yeah. And like most of your cars have a timer built in. Our Leaf had a thing. I could just set it to, their reasoning, the car manufacturer's reasoning there was, a lot of people have time of use billing. And so then they could just set their car to charge at night when the electricity was cheaper. And for a long time, that's what we did. I just had it set, it would start charging at 8:30 in the morning. That was about the time my solar panels were making enough, and stop at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That was about the time it dropped off. And I'll tell you what, just setting the timer in the car like that, you probably captured, at least 80% of, you've done 80%. My little doodad with the sophisticated stuff got the extra 20. So that's the difference.
Having the connection with the solar panels and the actually on-site energy generation encourages very sophisticated types of load management like you're doing. And it's interesting to think that over time, the incentive that's there, right, to say, oh, I can do my load washing here, I can make hay when the sun shines, et cetera, basically also enables you to, the amount of battery storage that you need to buy goes down, right? So the incentive is though to use the shifting of the demand, the usage during the solar hours, and then you have an overall lower cost system, right, for the investment. But then as far as everybody is concerned, right, trying to do that on the grid level and have any degree of the kind of efficiency that we can do when we can actually do load management for a load of wash, right, gives you some perspective of why it's so important for the shift of generation, and if it's electrification, EV or whatever, the shift to putting the power of those benefits in the hands of the consumer rather than asking the utility to do it for us, right?
Right. That kind of granularity gives a very big, it's a pretty significant jump in what you're capable of doing,
Sam,
Yeah,
your EV, I know you and Lynn were very involved in trying to figure out how to coordinate your solar array with your EV. For the same reason, right? Like you guys were really determined to make it match, right?
Yeah, and the Tesla app gives us the information that we need, and we're aware enough of what we're using when we're using it. So, we know kind of like when the refrigerator is running, because it's like it goes from 0.3 to 0.5 kilowatts. So we know when that goes on. And so, yeah, and we do that more manually, like Chuck was saying. But at some point, I think having something smarter than we are kind of pay attention when we're really busy to make sure that is happening correctly, that we're using the sun instead of the grid. It makes a lot of sense. And the other thing is, sometimes I think about bad things happening, and it gives a certain level of, self-sufficiency and privacy and the ability to withstand, you know, disasters. And there's a lot to be said for that.
Mhm.
Someday maybe we can hook a solar oven to our EV car.
A solar oven to your EV car?
Yes.
All right, that's too much air drag.
Yeah, yeah, you get the right windows and just park in the sun. Your car could be a solar oven.
A black Tesla with the windows up. Gets pretty.
I do wonder why, like, the Teslas have that glass roof. Why don't they just put solar cells in there?
Hey, I think they're working on it because, you know, the glass roof tiles, just trust me, I don't think it'll be long, and that will happen.
Yeah, there's a new, I can't remember the name of it. It's a new startup company. They're making, it's just like it's a little, like a 3-wheel EV. So I think it's 2 wheels in the front and 1 in the rear, but it's real spaceship. You know, it reminds me of something the Jetsons would have buzzed around in the sky. And it is covered, you can buy this thing covered in solar panels. And they claim that for, like, if you drive less than 30 or 40 miles a day and you park in the sun, you would never have to plug that car in. That,
Must be pretty lightweight.
Yeah. It's hyper efficient and very light and yeah. And like I say, you need the right conditions, but yeah. I don't remember the name of it, but it looked kind of sharp, So if you want to look like the Jetson.
So if you were putting in a Tesla battery system into an existing solar array, like we have an 8K solar array, Chuck's got a pretty good sized solar array too. And what would, if we were doing the batteries so that we could have that independence that Sam's talking about, what would be how would I fix up my driveway, so to speak, for charging our car, right? Would I get the Type 2 or is there, would it take the Tesla, get the Supercharger? I mean, I guess the Tesla Supercharger is like a really pricey proprietary thing, right?
Yeah, I don't know that anybody has put in and probably somebody who's got more money than they know what to do with.
Kind of overkill anyway, right?
Yeah. Us mere mortals, you can buy an extra charger from Tesla that you can wire in. It's about $500 for that charger as well. It's the same range as all the other level 2 chargers. So
it sounds like pretty important to keep the car in a heated place, not park it outside, especially in the winter, right? Because that'd be really rough on the battery if I was going to be using it for commuting. It
helps. Ours isn't heated. It's in the barn, but it's wide open. I just got one end of the barn. It's more like a carport. With the Tesla, I've never had any problem. And even with the Leaf, the only problem I ever had with that car was that one night when it hit minus 30. Was that 3 years ago? There was a really, really brutally cold snap there. The car battery itself was fine, but what most people don't realize is electric cars also have a 12-volt battery, just basically like the 12-volt battery that's in your regular car. And that's the battery. That battery actually froze in that Leaf. Once it warmed up and thawed out and I was able to get a charge back in it, the car was fine. But while it was frozen, I got a little nervous because nothing worked.
Yeah, during that time I had my Model X, and yeah, truly I did park it in the garage, but it was pretty darn cold in there. Like I would say 20, 25 below, and that's pretty cold, and it did fine. So yeah, now it really is better to keep your batteries warmer, and they can, you know, they have settings so that it can condition the battery. Your power walls can be conditioned too. But Al, when you got, and Alicia, is your Tesla charger Wi-Fi connected?
No. Wait, what do you
Yeah.
mean? In what way?
I read somewhere that the chargers are Wi-Fi connected. And I wondered if that's because they're going to do over-the-air updates for the charging components, or if it's to control your charging so that you can charge with only the sun. So I saw that on their website, I don't know, maybe about a year ago.
Sam?
I mean, the only thing I can tell you is like, I can see the charging happening on my phone even when I'm not there.
I have a Tesla charger, and had this excellent company from Viroqua that came down and installed it for me. Very, very good company. I shouldn't commercially give them any credit, I guess, but just a really good job. And real honestly, again, I don't know why I'm in this conversation other than whatever, to prove that I don't know anything. You actually go through a process called commissioning, which, Sam, as I understand it, I don't see anything different, because like my Tesla app will tell me what stage, you know, from the car tells me what stage the battery's at or whatnot. And the only thing that I think that commissioning, which is just you basically just hooking it up to your Wi-Fi, and the supposed value of that is firmware updates for that charger. Now, I honestly,
Yeah.
I have no idea whether it's doing that or not doing that, but that's what I understand is the stated purpose for it anyway.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually why, I mean, that was one of the things I was looking for, and why I didn't get a Tesla charger was because I couldn't find a way to remotely control the charger itself. You know, I can remotely control certain parts of the charging in the car, but I couldn't change the amperage that the car was drawing from remotely. I could turn it on and off, but I couldn't change the amperage. And that was the other piece I was looking for. And so that's why I went with this open source charger, because this was the one I found that I could do that with.
Right. Well, one of the things, because I'm a tightwad, in addition to everything else, is that the Darylin Power offers a rebate for home charger installations, and so along with that, you know, I did it and sent it into Scenic Rivers, and they said to do that you have to have an off-peak connection. And I said, well, that'll be great. I said, because I've had that for my heat pump and in my house, and it basically, there's not enough farmers around for the high demand, so very seldom do you get a high peak where they shut that thing down anyway. And so the guys from Scenic Rivers came out, and they couldn't figure out how to control that, even with that off-peak load control. So
Huh.
Al, you must be right. There must be something proprietary in there from Tesla that no, they just gave up. They shrugged their shoulders and said, no, we can't control that thing. So I didn't get that off-peak load controller then.
Huh.
They should be able, yeah, shouldn't they be able to control it from the utility side?
Yeah, I thought they would have put in a switch, you know, like between your breaker box and the charger, like what they would do with a water heater.
Well,
They
yeah,
remote-
Huh, that's interesting.
that's what I thought too. And that's, you know, that's the two guys were out here scratching their heads and making a couple phone calls, and then I forgot his name, the guy who kind of deals with
Ron.
Ron Jens. He
Mhm.
called and said that they just couldn't figure out how to do that. And again, being unsophisticated about that, it seems like should be something. At least you could figure out how to cut the breaker or whatnot. But they said their knowledge of it at least couldn't be done. But I do think that I do think the bit of information, I don't know if everybody's aware of the Darrell Power thing, that and that's depending upon whatever charger you have. They'll give you a rebate for installing that. So it might be another selling point for people installing home chargers.
Yeah. Yeah. They're happy to get people charging their cars.
Yeah.
Was that for any kind of charger or was it a off-peak charger or?
As I understand it, it's any kind of a level 2 charger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And the requirement for the rebate was it had to be load controlled.
Yes, supposedly that was it. But they got tired of listening to me, so they sent me my check, and I went on my merry way.
You got in under the wire because they couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't studied the Vernon Electric. Has anyone studied the Vernon Electric charge rebate? They have a $500 deal.
You should look into that. Dave just changed some of that, so it should be on the website, or give him a call, and that he just changed that. But this discussion about chargers, I think one thing that's important to note is that most homes will be able to handle a level 2 charger. I was sharing earlier with 4 of you that the Ford F-150 Lightning says that they're going to use an 80 amp charger. So that may require some additional wiring in people's houses, but a level 2 charger, pretty much every house should be able to handle that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Your typical level 2 is 50 amps, and that's not a crazy load.
So I joined late. Al, did you talk about like how special the electric car community is in your travels?
I did not, but that is a very good point.
Yeah, so when I was traveling to Phoenix, my sister and I and my niece, we went to a Target where they had superchargers, but they weren't hooked up. But 3 of us showed up there and just chatted for like 45 minutes just about what it was like to own our Teslas. And it's just so cool. And another place we stopped at it was like a Hardee's or somewhere just outside of Phoenix on our way to California. And this guy had a Model 3, and he just went out to check something, and he asked us if we could just watch his coffee while he's gone, because we're like the same kind of people, and we're trustworthy enough to watch his coffee.
Yeah, I got a feeling they will have it this year. They didn't last year, but in Custer, South Dakota, there's a Tesla rally. They do it pretty much every year, I think. And the name of it is The Sound of Silence. And 2 years ago, when we were going to Seattle, we couldn't figure out what's going on because we're in South Dakota. We're in the middle of nowhere, and we'd pull into a supercharger, and there'd be like 6 slots, and 5 of them are being used. I'm thinking, wow, these people like their Teslas. And then we get to the next one, and it's the same thing. And we started realizing the plates were from all over the country. There was like somebody from Rhode Island and somebody from Virginia, and that's how we found out this rally was going on. And yeah, and the same kind of story Sam was talking about. I mean, everybody'd plug in and then just sit around and shoot the breeze. It was really fun. Yeah, there is a sense of community that you have.
Just one other quick little thing. I was at the Supercharger in Alaska, and this guy pulled up next to us, and he plugged in to charge, and then he pulled out a cloth, what, you know, those cloths that collect the dust, microfiber, and he started cleaning the outside of his car during that. I thought, what a great idea.
I've done that before. Like,
Yeah.
I'll bring my little vacuum cleaner and clean it while I'm supercharging.
Right.
Yeah, we've done that, you know, and then, like, another cool idea, Laura and I saw a couple doing this when we were in Mauston at the Supercharger. They got out of their car, plugged in the charger, and they had on their like tennis shoes, and they went for a power walk. You know, so they were getting their exercise, walking around, and by the time they got back, the car was ready to go.
That's a great idea too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Funny,
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. Hey, it's better than just sitting in the car looking at Facebook, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, well, that was fun.
I guess we've concluded our Energy Club meeting then. Let's see, there was one person who, Arneson, AJ, does anyone know who EJ Arneson is? Just noticed, Chuck and both Chucks actually we know.
I know
Yeah.
a woman named Elizabeth Arneson, but I'm not sure if that was her.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I did recognize there was somebody who they'd been at previous ones as well. So.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So thank you very much, Alan. That was terrific. I learned a lot. I actually, I had it had never occurred to me that the DC to DC thing would be, you know, the way to go. And that's so obvious. I'm glad to have learned that with the chargers. That the charger's built into the car because obviously, you know, it's going to be AC, and that when you're charging a battery, you're not going to be able to charge that with AC. Yeah, it's totally obvious, but important to know.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know it till we had our car. Mm-hmm.
Like, why are we sticking AC into a car that's running on DC? Right. All right. Well, does anybody else have any other comments or questions? Chucks?
Great job, Alan. Very enjoyable.
Yeah. that's
Learned
nice.
something.
Thanks, Chuck. I'm so glad you could join us. This was fun.
Well, I didn't get the link till late, and the most thing I was interested in the charging thing, and I missed most of it, and so.
Jen's, that's a good announcement. Jen's got made a recording. And so you'll be able to put that up, and you can set your load management to turn on your TV, thumbs up, and then program to tune into the Zoom at the beginning. Okay.
And could you just email the link of the recording directly to Chuck Pasker? And then Chuck, you can watch it at your convenience.
I'd love that. Yes. chuckpastor.gmail.com. Yes.
Okay. Adios, folks.
All right, folks.
All right.
Good evening.
See you, Alicia. See you, Chuck. See you, Chuck.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, Rob.
See you later.
Thanks, Sam.
Yep.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks for all your work. I gotta go inside. I am melting.